Okay, so welcome to the 7th episode of CIPS Research Meets Management webinar series. My name is Vivian Song. I work for CIPS campus in Zurich. As CIPS has been committed to acting as a bridge between China and Europe, its presence in Europe was facilitated with the establishment of our campus in Zurich, Switzerland in 2015, so to help promote further dialogue and cooperation. Our faculty research spans a wide range of topics and published regularly in top management and entrepreneurship journals worldwide. In this webinar, it's my pleasure to welcome CIPS Associate Professor and Department Chair of Strategy and Entrepreneurship, Professor Daniel Chng. He will share insights from his research on Chinese social enterprises for profit enterprises that have an explicit social mission as their primary goal and more. Welcome, Professor Daniel Chng. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Vivian. Vivian, you'll be sharing my screen, right? Okay, so I will get started here. So good afternoon, every one of you who are joining us from Europe. And good evening to those of you who are joining us in Asia. So before we get into the presentation proper itself, I would like to say that we are very happy to actually have this opportunity to share with you our ongoing research on Chinese social enterprises. And this is actually collaborative work that spans a good number of authors, and I'm happy to be the one doing our presentation today. So before we actually start on the presentation itself, I want to kind of make a couple of points. One, I'm sorry that the title that you had signed up for is slightly different from the title that you're seeing right now on my PPT. This is my fault. I forgot to update our colleagues in Zurich that the topic that we'll be talking about is kind of more related to the title that you are looking at right now. So I know that many of you sign up to kind of get a little bit more understanding in terms of the differences between kind of Western social enterprises and Chinese social enterprises. I'll talk about it in the Q&A part, and also I've got a couple of slides at the end that kind of speaks to that. Okay, but today we are kind of very excited to kind of share with you ongoing research on actually how Chinese social enterprise actually try to shape paradoxical tensions in their organizations to actually influence their performance and sustainability. Okay. The second thing that I would like to kind of mention is that it's never easy to actually talk about research and present research to business professionals. I'll try my best to translate academic research so that it's relevant to professionals. But please bear with me if things get a little bit too academic. Okay. The other thing is that I promised Vivian that we'll try to finish my presentation within 45 minutes. That means so that we have actually enough time to do Q&A, right? So I will be speaking relatively fast, but not to worry about it because we'll be sharing with you the presentation slides at the end of the session itself. So if you have any questions pertaining to what we talk about today, feel free to reach out to myself or any of our co-authors if you have further questions about it. Okay, and we do hope to definitely give us enough time to kind of talk about these issues as well. The last thing that I want to kind of just mention before we get into our presentation proper is that I'm coming off 7 full days of teaching. So the brain here is not working as fast as it should. So my apologies up front that if everything doesn't go as smoothly as it is. It's been a lot of teaching on our end here. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let me start by speaking about the topic of social enterprises. Okay, so sorry for the technical hitch over here. So our agenda for this session is kind of the few things that we have here. So basically, we start off by just giving you a reason why we should be studying social entrepreneurs and social enterprises. We switch over to a quick overview of social enterprises in China. I really hope to share a video with you, but I'm not sure on our side, we've been able to do it, but it seems that you guys are not picking up my screen. So we may not be able to kind of watch that video on this side here, but we'll give you a flavor of what social enterprises are in China. We will talk through some social business models. Here, we'll go through it quite quickly. I will provide some more specific details in the appendix that we'll head out to you, so you could look at it a little bit more. The bulk of the session will be on our research paper titled "Walking on the Edge," right? How social entrepreneurs in China actually, balance paradoxical tensions and improve their performance as well as their sustainability. At the end of the session, we'll kind of talk about some key insights that we can take away from this ongoing research. So as I mentioned, this is ongoing research. It's actually in the third round in one of our major entrepreneurship journal. It's hopefully we can get it through, and maybe all of you will be seeing this paper in print, perhaps in a few months. But it's very difficult to publish in top journals, so we still stand the risk of having it rejected. But there's still useful insights in it. So let's start with trying to kind of get a sense of why we need to pay attention to social enterprises today, right? So I'm going back a little bit in terms of history. So up to the mid 20th century, the major social as well as market actors, right, are nation states, right? And nation states pursue power, right? Of course, social issues are within the preview of these nation states, but during this period, right, I think it was very much everybody for themselves, right? Nation states were more interested in securing and pursuing their power than to pay attention to social issues. Then if we moved up to the end of the 20th century, here we see the emergence of corporations, right? And corporations pursue profits, right? So given the fact that a lot of progress happens during this period of time, we still see a lot of social problems, although markets evolved and there's a lot of wealth created during this period. But the primary reason for this is that corporations cannot be relied upon to actually address social issues, right? It is not their priority. Their priority is to create and service the market as efficiently as possible, right? During this period, we also see the emergence of non-profits, right? Non-profits does a great job in terms of trying to address the emerging social issues, but of course, the struggle that all non-profits face is the issue of scalability, efficiency, as well as sustainability. So in this time period, right, we see both wealth created, but at the same time, a lot of prevailing social issues emerging, right? Then what we see today in the 21st century, it shifts. The actor now has become individuals, right? Citizens, right? People who are pursuing purpose, right? In this context, we start to see both individuals as well as enterprises emerging, right, in many different countries. Primarily, a lot of these activities have been happening in developing markets because there are, what we would describe as wicked social problems in these markets, right? So this is where we are starting to move from nation states to corporations to individuals who are actually trying to create purpose, right? So this is an example of one of the earlier social enterprises that came out from India. It's called Barefoot College. And one of the things that they try to do is to bring education, right, broadly across, started in India, but has emerged as an international social enterprise with a lot of similar activities in Africa, right? So given the fact that we have moved to a stage whereby we see the progressive emergence of social enterprise, what are social enterprise? So let's kind of give a definition to it. So in our research, as well as a lot of academic conversation today, we see social enterprise as all types of financially and legally independent enterprises that has explicitly social goal as their primary purpose, okay? So they are trying to use market means, right, to create or to generate enough cash flow, right, to support their social activities, but their primary objective is still to address some social ills or some social problems in the thing, right? The big thing that we see different from charities is that social enterprises are all for-profit organizations, and they try to secure a large proportion of their income from business activities. Okay, so if we were to kind of anchor where social enterprise is, let me set up two extreme points, right? So on the one hand, we have for-profit companies, okay, and on the extreme end, we have what we call non-governmental organizations that is purely charity voluntary organizations, right? So these two end basically anchors the type of or the difference of for-profit organization vis-a-vis non-profit or non-governmental non-profit organization. There are some NGOs that have started to emerge with some form of a commercial activity, but they are still very much non-profit in that sense, right? On the other side of the spectrum, we also have more and more for-profit organizations that have a social imperative. In the US, we have organizations that are registered as B Corp, whereby profit itself and maximizing returns for shareholders is not a key priority for them. The equivalent of that in different economies as well, whereby for-profit organizations are paying a lot more attention to social issues. Tesla is probably not a B Corp, but Elon Musk always presents Tesla as if it is addressing a major social problem in the world itself, right? Then what we have sitting right in the middle here is what we call for-profit social enterprises. So they are run with full profit intentions, right? But their primary objective is to address a social problem, right? And this is the type of organizations we are focusing on when we looked at in our research itself. So this is what we are talking about when we say we're talking about social enterprises. Okay, as a social enterprise, because they are trying to address a social problem using market means. Okay, they are actually experiencing competing forces, right? That is pulling the organizations in two directions. On one hand, they have to really follow market rules, okay, and be competitive in the market space. At the same time, right, they have to basically, drive their activities towards addressing a social problem. So this is where they need to be profitable on one hand, and at the same time, they have to address a social problem that has to date not been properly addressed by civil institutions, right? Whether it's government or charity. Okay, so what this presents in itself conceptually is what we call a paradox, right? So a paradox here, I provide a definition for it. It is contradictory yet interrelated elements that may seem to be logical, right, individually, but are inconsistent when you put together. So what the social enterprise does is to take commercial logic, commercial business logic of for-profit firms, and then embed it together with the social mission of a charity, right? So here you have two competing demands that they have to attend to. So this presents difficulty for the social enterprise. But a lot of people who have done research in this would mention that it is because of this paradoxical tension that it creates opportunity for entrepreneur to act, right, to act innovatively, to come up with a solution that not only address the social problems, but is market sustainable. So they can draw on the market to actually achieve their social mission, right? So this leads us to a lot of eminent individuals who kind of looked at entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship and call it, it is kind of a way to kind of create new socially responsible business model, right? That focus beyond what we have experienced in terms of market liberalization and profit maximization. So in still using what we are used to in terms of markets, but using the market in ways that can be then diverted towards addressing social ills that we face today. Okay, so that's kind of a general sense of what social enterprise are and social entrepreneurships try to accomplish. Here, let's take a quick look at the social enterprises in China. So why China needs social enterprise? China for a long time, as a centrally a kind of centrally managed economy and political system, seems to have the government looking after everything. So why do we really need social enterprises in China. You'd be surprised that social enterprises in China are actually supported by the government, right? The main issue is that whenever you have emergence where markets are developing and things like that, then you're going to face an issue whereby social problems will also come about, right? So given that the fact that social problems exist, then entrepreneurs and social enterprises can emerge, right? So the main thing in China has been the economic reform that basically kicked off a very rapid growth in China, right? This rapid growth and development in China includes, massive rural migration from the countryside into the urban cities to sustain the economic transformation that is taking place, right? And this is happening within a historically centrally managed economy, right? So all these things are happening. So one of the big outcome of that is that public services is constantly under strain, right? Because of China's large population. So things like rural poverty, left behind children, elderly care, all these social issues gets amplified, right, and becomes more severe. The other thing is that in this context of rapid economic development, the country is becoming richer and richer. Companies are getting more and more profitable. But unfortunately, in this early phase of development, much of the business has always been focused on profit maximization, right? Because of their focus on profit maximization, we even see some unsavory market behavior, right? So this leads to social issues like food security, poor product that is defective and dangerous to people, air pollution. So these things are happening in China itself. Of course, the government as kind of the primary actor could be addressing this, but like we said before, government under the conditions of limited resources and in a very complex large market like China, they do struggle to make that happen. So for the government itself, they are actually very encouraging of social enterprises, right? So Chinese social enterprises, and this is data that has been collected by China Charity Fair, a civil institution that looks at both charities as well as social enterprises, just to share with you some data, right? So we see a large number, and just to put things into context, prior to about 2015, right, there were, of course, social enterprises around, but none of them were basically recognized, right? They were basically for-profit organizations that had some social activities. Real recognition of social enterprises kind of started from the 2015 and kind of rapidly grew. Today, there is a large number of social enterprise that are actually certified by the China's Charity Fair itself, right? So we went from a couple of dozen to today's couple of thousands, right? Or even tens of thousands of social enterprise that we see today. Most of the social enterprises are in the developed cities. They are situated there, tier 1 cities, and increasingly more and more activities in tier 2 cities. But I must say that most of their efforts, right? Most of their efforts are actually aiming at rural issues, right? Or rural areas, right? So yes, they are located in the big cities, but they are really addressing social ills across China, right? Most of them are registered as businesses. So within the preview of China Charity Fair itself, they do have some that are pure charities, right? But increasingly, more and more of them are registered as for-profit businesses, right? 72% of them have clear social mission, sometimes not as the primary objective, but increasingly a lot of them makes their social objective as their primary cause, right? They are all relatively young, so 53% of them are founded after 2015, right? So they are new. They are kind of a new form, right, of organization emerging in China itself. So only 7%. Little over 7% is actually older than 10 years old. So some of these are predates, right? Predates earlier ideas of what social enterprises are. 50% of them, plus percent of them are actually relatively small, right? 3 to 10 employees. And only 6.4% have actually substantive activities. And I would say that this is kind of also skewed, though. Maybe collectively, less than 20 of them are really significant and large, right? The majority of them are fairly small. Okay, so out of all these social enterprise that we see, 23.8% of them reports that they are actually in some way sustainable, right? They make enough revenue from their business activity to sustain their social activities, right? And about more than 50% of them are actually haven't reached that point, right? So their business activities are accounting for still substantive amount of their operational costs, but they still rely on some charitable fund. A lot of times it could be from the social entrepreneur himself, or it could be from the government. The government do engage quite actively with these social entrepreneurs to support their activities, right? So they are still using market means, but they still need to rely on non-market resources to actually help them sustain their business. Okay, so this probably gives you the impression that social enterprises are not easy, right? And I'm just giving you a couple of examples of social enterprises that we actually studied, right? So Dialogue in the Dark is actually the China branch of a social enterprise in Germany that basically provides, I would say, informative, experiential experience for people who are blind, right? So they have hire people who are blind. They provide kind of an experience for people who are not blind, right? To basically educate them to understand what blindness means. The Shenzhen Tianyou is probably one of the most successful social enterprises in the world. I think they were recognized by Scholz Foundation. They hire over 10,000 disabled people working in a very advanced high-tech industry. So they have actually two small listed companies, right? So they are listed in the China Small Cap Board, but they actually have two listed companies among a bunch of activities. Shenzhen Xi'an Car Wash is very interesting. I'll show you a little video clip about them. Is basically a founder who basically created a car wash for intellectually disabled people, right? So the intellectually disabled people would probably be a social group that is the most challenging to provide for, right? And in this context, it's very interesting that this founder worked hard to create this. And then Daddy Lab Hangzhou is a founder who wanted to protect his daughter from inferior or dangerous products, right, that children use, and from there emerge into what we would consider key opinion leader. So he is in China now, for a long time, what we call an internet celebrity, right? He produced a lot of tests, and then he puts up the tests as videos and kind of educate parents in terms of what they should be buying. Okay, so these are just a quick rundown. So here I actually have a short video, about 5 minutes. I think it will take that much of your time to put into context, right? To put into context what Chinese social enterprise is. So let me just play this video.
智障啊，傻瓜啊，实际上是一种很刺痛的一种叫法。喜憨儿就是我们这些父母对孩子的一个期望，非常喜悦，非常单纯。
开会了，哪位的？周辉、萌萌，同学们，往前。所以你们就是非常合格的洗车工，光荣不光荣？
我们这里有16个孩子，智力水平几乎就是小龄阶段。
重新来，你今天的任务是把收银的工作一定要做好。
最初的时候还是比较混乱，做了这个忘那个。但是喜憨儿他不会偷懒，门板擦5遍他会默默的数，擦3遍他也不会停下来。没有办法去除的一些顽字，这些孩子们还在努力的想去把它擦掉。 早期顾客来是怜悯，后来看到我们这些孩子能做好，就有很多成为回头客。 重新来，从甘肃农村家庭来的孩子。
不用找了，不用找了，不用啊。
他自己在网络上面发现了我们的一些报道，跟他妈妈说：“妈妈，我能做这个事情。”我们正常是8点半才上班，每天早晨他是最早的一个，7点钟就开始做准备工作。没有人教他，没有人跟他说。
感谢
您
对
喜
憨儿长期帮助。
对。
你好，是要起床吗？那就放那边吧，谢谢。好，我们到。
李佳诗这个孩子，我们在实行轮休的时候，他就很闷闷不乐，是不是我哪里做的不好，你不要我？拿到自己的收入，他会觉得我很骄傲。
发工资，我请他喝可乐，他是我的小伙伴嘛。我可能不吃饭，我就去看啊，减肥啊。
减肥啊？
要找到女朋友嘛，就要减肥一点的人才好。3、2、1。
我的梦想娶老婆生孩子，生女儿，送她上学，交学费。夜里我望着天空，我会的照顾妈妈。
2015年至今，我们已经洗了3万台车。因为我的孩子是一个喜憨儿，作为一个父亲来讲，在给孩子找出路，去尝试的放手。实际上，他们身上有很多方面的能力，我觉得也是需要向他学习的。
梦想就是搬出去住，要自立，要生活。
我爸妈出去挣点钱不容易，我长大了住在家里。
我长大了，我就可以当摄影师。
我就是喜欢刘德华，我想跟他一样当明星。
Okay, so this is one of the social enterprise we actually studied, and we've been actually working with them for quite a long period from 2017 until now. So let's kind of move forward. Hopefully the video gives you a kind of a sense of what this social enterprises in China is doing. Here I'm just going to quickly touch on a couple of things. I just want to mention that there's actually more information that I'll provide in the appendix. So if you look at in terms of social enterprise business model, right, how you separate the business activities from the social mission itself can take different form, right? On the extreme left, as you see here, this is what we call where the business activity and the social mission is fully embedded, right? Here, I think it creates the opportunity for potential the largest opportunity for social impact, but at the same time, it produces the greatest tension, right, between the social mission and the business activity itself. So sustainability becomes a big challenge. On the right-hand side, we see some social enterprises whereby the social mission and the business activities are actually separated, right, clearly separated. Here, in the sense, it presents the least tension because you just carry out your business activity. The business activity is profitable. You shift the resources into the social mission activity side. But here, it typically ends up having the smallest social impact. We have social business model, which is kind of partially overlap. This kind of model is what we describe probably as stuck in the middle a little bit. So some of it is kind of, some of the activities that they do are actually both socially orientated and also business orientated, but much of what they do are also separated. Here, this type of organizations are probably at risk, at the biggest risk of what we call mission drift, right? So they are likely to shift to the model on the right, whereby the things becomes disconnected, right? Right. So this is kind of, we'll quickly just touch on the different types of social enterprise. What we actually looked at is mainly social enterprises on the left, okay, that we have studied. So let me quickly then move into our research, because I noticed that I probably taking a bit too much time. So let's quickly talk about this research that we've been doing. So the motivation behind this research is clearly from the perspective of many social, well, I wouldn't say many, actually all social enterprises faces paradoxical tension, right? But we see some social enterprises doing much better than others, right? The mortality rate of social enterprises is actually quite high, right? A lot of them do not survive because they cannot manage these tensions effectively. So our research question is very straightforward. We wanted to kind of understand how social entrepreneurs can actually shape and manage these paradoxical tensions productively, right, in a way that would then enhance their social enterprises' performance and sustainability. So what we did was we conducted a multi-case qualitative study of 4 social enterprises in China between 2017 to 2021. In fact, we actually studied a lot more social enterprise, but in our research paper, we decided to collapse it to these 4 because these 4 social enterprise actually was very illustrative. There were 2 that was effective and 2 that were less effective. I mentioned less effective in the sense that they are not probably achieving as much of what they can both on the social side as well as the financial side. But all of these are reasonably successful social enterprise. So I want to be clear, they are reasonably successful social enterprises. Some are more successful than the others, right? Then what we did was that we essentially collected primary data from by interviewing the people that were involved in these social enterprises. So we conducted semi-structured interviews, and we actually supplement a lot with archival data. There's always a lot of secondary data that's written about these companies, right, or these social enterprises. In our interview, we use open-ended question. We asked them to speak about their experience when social business tension emerged, right? So when there were competing demands between what they were trying to do socially and what they had to do for their business. And we actually gave them a lot of autonomy to share with us the various experiences that they had. So what we did was, after collecting all this information, and we had quite an extensive collection, we actually collected over 4 waves, 3 to 4 waves. Typically, maybe every 6 months or so, we interact with them, not in person, but through electronic means. And we analyzed the data that we collected both within case and across cases to basically try to uncover similarities in what they are doing, as well as differences, right? So our emergent kind of theoretical model that comes out from this kind of qualitative research is that we find social entrepreneurs, right, were more effective in shaping and managing paradoxical tensions when they actually employ strategic actions that were collectively paradoxical, right? So this sounds very, kind of a lot of paradox in there, right? But what we really see is that some of the behaviors that they take have to be flexible and inclusive, but at the same time, some of the actions they take are actually the opposite, right? They are inflexible and exclusive. So there is no kind of one approach to it. Actually, they need to take paradoxical actions that actually help them develop paradoxical leadership in their organizations. So what did the more effective social entrepreneurs actually did? They took 3 distinctive actions, right? They used integrative criticisms of conventional solution, right, as opposed to contrasting criticism. They took unambiguous and steadfast non-negotiables, right? Things we will elaborate on all these concepts later on, as opposed to ambiguous and also malleable non-negotiables. They define holistic and relevant performance metrics as opposed to narrow and tangential performance metrics. So let's kind of elaborate a little bit on this. So before we go into each of the part, let me just show you the model. So when paradoxical tensions arise between their social welfare and their business, commercial business logic, what we see is that social entrepreneurs engage in this paradoxical strategic behavior, right? There is a flexible, inclusive, integrative criticism, inflexible, exclusive, unambiguous, non-negotiable, right? And then flexible and exclusive, holistic and relevant performance metric. So they take these actions, and what these actions allow them to do is to develop paradoxical leadership capabilities and practices within their social enterprises, right? We see a more clear paradoxical mindset that allows the stakeholders in the organizations to actually deal with the tensions that come out from the social welfare and the commercial business logic. It also pushed them to actually confront and accept the tension, right? So they actually embrace the fact that their social enterprises has contradictory objectives, right? So this allows them to actually then come up with creative synergy to actually deal with these issues. What we see then is that, paradoxical leadership capabilities and practices strongly kind of help these social enterprises to actually enhance their social, financial goals, as well as their sustainability over time, right? So going forward from here on, I'm just going to kind of elaborate on the three set of strategic actions, right? Integrative criticism as opposed to contrasting criticism, unambiguous and steadfast non-negotiable as opposed to ambiguous and malleable non-negotiables, right? And holistic and relevant performance metrics as opposed to narrow and tangential performance metrics, okay? So let's move into the first strategic actions that they take, right? So we see that effective social entrepreneurs, they use an integrative way to kind of talk about current solutions, right? That is available in the market, whether is it a business solution or whether is it a non-government, non-business solution provided by charities as well as government solution, right? What we see them doing is that they are actually quite flexible in the way they criticize, right? They don't preclude any means of actually trying to address the objectives that they have, right? So all of them actually express dissatisfaction with kind of current arrangements, right? Whether is it government or charities or whether is it business approaches to some of these issues, they always criticize, right? But I think what they do is that they take a more rational approach to all these things. They try to understand the pros and cons of the different solutions, and they try to really understand how they can actually get at the fundamental issues that are facing both the social issue as well as how to successfully survive in the market, right, with their business activity. So this is an example that comes out from the founder of the intellectually disabled social enterprise. Here the founder is critical of what the government and the Chinese Disabled People's Federation is doing in terms of not actually providing very substantive employment opportunities for them, right? But at the same time, he recognizes that they do provide the necessary conditions, okay, that he can use to actually move forward on his own social mission, right? So he recognized that what is missing in the market is actually good projects. So he says, let me do the group project. I'll do the group project. I'll show it to you as I create more opportunities. Then I would gain social influence and I can bring in resources from society as well as the government to support this activity. So a very inclusive approach, right? Then what this allowed, right, is that it actually allows paradoxical tensions to emerge productively, right? So it allows a rational and meaningful comparison to say, this is what the market is doing, this is what the government is doing, this is what charities are doing, this is what I can do differently, right? So it allows that to happen. What we see is what we call a paradoxical mindset, a both and mindset, right? So we understand that there is both a market need as well as a social need, but we understand that they both have to coexist, right? So this brings out the ability to kind of understand that competing elements, while contradictory, are actually also interrelated. So how do we then deal with that, right? So this allows the tension to actually emerge productively, to be identified and accepted, right, as complex interdependence, right? So what we see is that stakeholders in this kind of environment basically embrace the social business tension as an important part of how they are performing, right? So this brings about better performance. this is an example of how that can happen, right? So this is from the the physically disabled social enterprise. Is from the COO. The COO mentioned this, and he surprisingly is not disabled, right? So he's one of the minority non-disabled people in an entire organization that is filled with disabled employees. So he sees that besides kind of addressing kind of the commercial aspect of the job, right? This is a professional job. I'm coming here for a salary. He sees a lot of them sees real value, real social value in what they are doing, right? And even for them, they think that how do I use my ability, right? Normal ability, right, to actually build onto the platform to actually create both economically viable options as well as socially meaningful work, right? So here is an example whereby they really embrace both the business logic as well as the commercial logic, and they see what they are doing above and beyond simply a job, right? In this company, one of their key activities is actually to provide IT solutions, customized software solutions for companies, and they do it very well and at good profits, right? I mentioned that this organization has 2 listed companies, right? So this is what they do. So then what happened to the ineffective social entrepreneurs? They take a contrasting approach, right? Here, they rigidly focus on the problems that conventional solution has, right? And they kind of try to exclude that. This is kind of interesting because if you think about it, right? If you think about it, a social enterprise, okay, embrace both logics, right? And yet they were very critical of either logic that they actually put together, right? So what happens with this kind of approach is that it actually brings out an inability to actually understand that both the social and the business aspects of a social enterprise is intangibly integrated, right? So they really struggle. They take very extreme views of how the other solutions don't provide a solution that they can provide, right? So this is an example here. I'm going to run through this pretty quickly, but the slides are available to you to have a look. So let me kind of move forward. So we see in elderly healthcare as well as blind, the social enterprise that they take very extreme views of what the existing solutions are. They focus on the inadequacies and they don't try to kind of build that into what they are trying to offer, right? So what this happens is that when you do this, you actually start taking on what we could describe as a dilemma either or mindset, right? So you start thinking of ideas as incompatible, and then you try to kind of make trade-offs, right, and make a choice from all the different things. So this is a very typical kind of mindset that we see whenever competing demands are in place. We try to apply a trade-off mentality, right? And a trade-off mentality, in a lot of ways, in a intractable paradox, it's difficult to apply, right? It's difficult to apply, and it cannot bring about a optimal solution. It actually leads you to a suboptimal decision, right? So what this does, it exposes fault lines between the social and the business goals. It creates a lot more tension, a lot more opposition than it would have necessarily be present, right? So as opposed to integrative, which brings about kind of a acceptance of the social business tension, a contrasting approach actually brings out more opposition, okay? So again, an example of how that happens. This is interesting because this founder actually recognized that he can have big impact in nursing homes, but he feels that nursing homes is difficult to do. And then he give up, right? He says, commercially, it's difficult to do. So, instead of pursuing the big social impact that he can have, he actually give up on this aspect of the business and instead pursue other, what he would perceive as easier commercial opportunities, right? So this is kind of a contradiction, and it leads to kind of their ability. So I will try to kind of run through these slides very quickly. Unambiguous and steadfast non-negotiables are basically setting up rules to say, what do you, in terms of both actions and stakeholders, in terms of what you can do and what you cannot do, right? So we see very clear examples of this. If you remember the video, the intellectually handicapped boy took the money and says, I have to return you, right? So one of the non-negotiables that this social enterprise did was to say that we will not price ourselves above the market, and neither will we accept tips, okay, for service rendered. So they say we only take whatever we price and charge you for. So this is a non-negotiable, And from their founding until now, they have been very insistent on that. What non-negotiable does is that non-negotiable pushes the contradictions it forces the contradictions to come out, right? So it shows that there is plurality in interest, there's scarcity in resources, and then it brings up the salience, okay, of the tension, right? It says this is something that is there, you need to deal with it, right? So it actually encourages what we consider creative synergies, whereby they can come up with solutions to actually deal with these contradictory elements. So I have some examples here, right? Pricing to market, not accepting tips, right? Not partnering with for-profit organizations, and they were very clear in terms of how they see this, okay? In terms of the opposite, right? The ineffective social entrepreneurs, they try to define non-negotiables. They try to say, these are the things that we will do, these are the things that we will not do. But unfortunately, they are quite ambiguous in terms of what they do. So when they talk about some of these things, they tend to be very abstract or very high level. We will not work with this type of people. But when the prevailing condition changes, sometimes their non-negotiables become changeable, right? That's what we mean by malleable, right? It becomes possible, right? Everything becomes potentially possible. What this does is that it buries out the tensions that they face, right? So this is a potential problem. What happens is that stakeholders do not know what they can do and what they cannot do, right? Then what results is increased contention, and when contentions are in place, there is a tendency for the actors to actually take defensive behaviors, right? To take defensive behaviors. So this is what we see in terms of non-negotiables. With holistic and relevant performance metrics, you could say that, hey, firms need to do that. But what we see is very interesting. It is not just the combination of social and business goals, right? It's not just taking what traditionally non-profits would do and for-profit organizations and kind of agglomerate them all together. We find that this is actually not effective. This is not effective. What is effective is to actually be very selective on the things that that has meaning to your key stakeholders, not necessarily the consumers, the customers, or not necessarily the beneficiary, right? You have to find enough and holistic kind of approach to identify and measure your performance. Otherwise, if you go by the traditional charity measures or the for-profit measures, you cannot survive, right? Because you will not match up to either of this. What this does is that it allows the shift from what we call, a problem solving to a possibility finding kind of approach, right? So they no longer see their business as zero sum, right? By embedding a lot more different performance metrics that is highly relevant to their key stakeholders, it allows them to actually draw on a far larger pool of resources that they traditionally will not have. Okay, so my last slide on our topic on the academic work. So the opposite of which is the social enterprise actually take very narrow and tangential metrics. What this happens is that they often go back to efficiency measures, and whether it is for profit or not for profit. And what this does is that it actually limits their thinking, right? And kind of enforce this sense of scarcity and actually creates a tension and anxiety, which actually then invoke a lot more dilemma thinking, right? So all this kind of inhibits their ability to do it. So quick summary before we move into the Q&A part. So I think today social enterprises are very important to our collective future. We see that emerging in China as well. And in the context of China, the government is actually very proactive in actually enabling these social enterprises, right? So social enterprises are inherent paradox. We have to understand that they try to pursue both social and business goals with limited resources. They face severe performance and sustainability challenges, right? So how did this set of Chinese social enterprise, how do they actually achieve this? We see that, you could do this by taking strategic actions that help you develop paradox leadership, right? So the mindset, the skills, the fortitude, to what we say, walking on the edge, right? So you're kind of balanced on the edge and you keep trying to move forward on it. So with a very interesting thing is we see that a lot of these social enterprises, they are business savvy, socially driven people, right? So this is very interesting. And what we see them building up is a very comprehensive, inclusive business model, not necessarily innovative. A lot of things that we see was not out of the world, right? But they really are able to secure the community support, and that is essential to their success and sustainability. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, then now is where we can take some Q&A. Vivian?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. It was indeed a very emotional sharing. I guess due to the time limit, let us take 2 to 3 questions. So you mentioned about paradox before. What is paradoxical leadership and how is this different from other forms of leadership?
So the paradox in social enterprise is very much because of the nature of social enterprise, right? What they try to do is to embed both a market logic as well as a social logic into the same organization. But paradox is not exclusive to social enterprises. A lot of for-profit organizations faces paradox as well, right? So the classic paradox in for-profit organization is exploration and exploitation, right? Companies have to decide, do I continue to exploit my current capabilities or do I explore and create new capabilities more relevant to the future, right? So that is a typical example of paradox in organizations. Long-term, short-term, that is also a persistent paradox that business managers have to deal with.
Yeah, another question might be relevant to the previous one. So do normal for-profit firms also face paradoxes? And can you give some examples?
Yeah, so those some of the examples I shared, right? Exploration, exploitation is kind of one of those issues that companies face. Long-term, short-term orientation are things that a company has to face. I think today's conversation for a lot of for-profit organizations is the issue of purpose, right? So if you bring in purpose and you say that organizations, for-profit organizations have to do more than just make money, right? And that is what I think we face a lot in a lot of European countries, right? Everybody's talking about ESG today. In this kind of a context, then you are actually embedding what a social enterprise face, right? A social enterprise purposefully embed both a social logic as well as a commercial business logic. Now, a lot of organizations are moving towards what they call purpose-driven organization, and they have to address social, economic, governance issues. Right. So if you start adopting that, then a lot of for-profit organizations are going to become more and more like a social enterprise, right? Although a bit they don't put a social objective at their key objectives, right? But progressively, organizations are going to have to look at social enterprise and say, how can we learn from them?
Here we see another very interesting question. So how do social enterprises take on the fierce market competition to survive or grow?
So it's very, So the social enterprises are not trying to change the market, right? So businesses are trying to shape the market, right? The social enterprises are basically trying to manage the tension within their organizations and still use the market in the current form, right? In a lot of ways, they are not as ambitious as trying to influence or radically transform the market. They want to borrow what is the market can create in terms of money opportunities, and then bring those opportunities into their major goal of actually supporting a social issue. So if you look at the car wash, right? The car wash is a very simple concept, right? But the founder is able to exploit it in a way that is very meaningful to the social group that he's trying to address, but at the same time, make enough money, right? Make enough money that can allow him to do that. So if I can just move a little bit forward and talk about, because the title of the original title was, what is the difference between Chinese social enterprise and Western social enterprise? Maybe I can touch on that a little bit. If I move forward on this, I actually have a couple of, I just messaged for you, people, but we can talk about the business model, right? What we notice about the Chinese business model is that they tend to have a much more embedded logic, right? Whereby the business activities, the social enterprise is actually putting the business activity and the beneficiary inclusively. So if you see these slides here, we see the one that I circled at the bottom. That is a typical Chinese model. The top ones that I don't circle are the typical Western or even emerging markets model. The problem is that the other models actually do not embed the business revenue model very well. they still need a lot of support from other stakeholders to actually create a profitable model. But the Chinese model are able to kind of fully embed these two logic in. They will not pursue the above two logic, right? Similarly, there are other models that we see here. These are different models. We see the top two models very common in Western markets, but again, the Chinese will not pursue these models. They will use the bottom model again. This is a different model from the ones earlier on, but again, they will embed the social enterprise, the business activities, and the beneficiary tightly, right? And actually, within that model, they are able to create business. The business directly affect the social mission itself, right? And their last slide is just business models that are applied outside of China, but not popular with the Chinese social enterprises. Okay, so this is just a couple of slides that goes a little bit deeper into the business model and how the Chinese social enterprises business model are slightly differentiated.
Thank you very much, Professor Chng. I guess we have to carry the discussion offline due to the time limit. And thank you everyone who actively participated in today's webinar. We will send a follow-up email with the summary slides as well as the link of the video if you want to watch back. I hope to see you all in our next webinar. Bye, everyone.